All right. Thank you for staying with us. We're just getting into that discussion on the U.S. elections, what's happening right there. We know that U.S. President Donald Trump has less than 2 weeks left in office, but there's another twist to this. The Senate top Democrat has called for his presidential powers to be removed immediately after his supporters violently stormed the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday. I'll tell you all about that in just a bit. It's called the 25th Amendment. But let me introduce my guest real fast. Joining us online, Nakia White, Political and International Relations Analyst. Thank you so much for making time. And also Joanna LeBlanc, National Security and Foreign Affairs Legal Analyst, joining us from D.C. And Joanna, I'll start with you on this. What is your view of what's happening in the U.S. right now?
First and foremost, I think what transpired yesterday was an attack on America's democracy. But what we also saw is that the rule of law prevailed, and there was an attempt to intimidate the process of confirming the president-elect and the vice president-elect, and it was not successful because of the laws that we have in place here in America. However, it is rather concerning because some people are calling this a coup d'etat, an insurrection, and I respectfully disagree because I don't think it was such. Again, I do think that it was an attempt to intimidate the process and to postpone the process, which was successful for a few hours, and then ultimately the members of Congress were able to get back to work. But another element that I want to look at is that I live here in the nation's capital, and I work on the Hill quite often. I'm often on the Hill meeting with members of Congress as well as staffers, and I can tell you it is incredibly difficult to get around the state capitol. And when I saw how the protesters had access to the office of the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and various other offices, and ransacked those offices, it was very concerning because the question is now then, who were involved in this process? I don't think those protesters acted alone. I think some of the people perhaps on the Hill may have assisted them, or perhaps the DC, the Capitol Police were just not doing their job to ensure that the people were safe and secured, because it's very problematic. And I'm looking to see the answers to that and on how is it that those protesters had so much access to the nation's capital, a capital that is often very secured.
Okay, let's bring in Nakia White on this. Nakia, what are your thoughts on the situation in America right now?
What we saw yesterday was clear. It was insurrection. It was a coup. It was an attempted coup incited by the sitting president. He asked his supporters, his gang, his thugs to walk down Presidential Way, to storm Congress. It is very clear what happened yesterday. And it's very clear how apparent it was that white privilege was also at play in terms of them being able to get in so easily with very little resistance. In fact, it took police 3 to 4 hours to get them under control. They stormed offices. They took computers. You don't know if there was a foreign actor in that crowd who could have also taken information or put, some kind of spyware on some of the computers. Yesterday was clear. It was an attempted coup. And there's no reason that president, that thug that's sitting in the White House right now, should not be arrested and jailed and brought up on charges of treason and brought on charges of incitement. If it was a regular citizen who had done that same thing, they would be in federal handcuffs right now. They may even be in Guantanamo Bay. And so my hope is that Congress will act very swiftly in getting this insurrectionist out of office. Right now, President Trump is the biggest threat to national security. And I'm not sure what the other expert that you have on was seeing yesterday. But certainly what I saw and what the majority of America saw was an attempted coup. Clear and simple.
As a legal scholar, we have to define what a coup d'etat means. And when I look at the definition, what transpired yesterday did not meet the elements of a coup d'etat. Now, again, and even with the allegation of the president inciting violence, now there could definitely be an argument for that. But another element is that you need to have intent. And I think oftentimes the Supreme Court have made it extremely difficult to show intent when it comes to various types of cases all across the board. So yes, were the president's comments could they be interpreted as for making the people to act the way they acted yesterday? Absolutely, there's definitely an argument, no doubt about that. But the intent element that is needed to show that the president incited violence, I don't think it's quite there from a legal perspective. And I think that as we are analyzing this case and as the federal prosecutors are analyzing this case, we must not overcharge, because in a lot of cases, what you see is ambitious prosecutors will overcharge, and ultimately you will lose the case. Ultimately, we must truly assess the situation, look at the law, remove our emotions from the totality of the circumstance, and apply the law accordingly.
Okay. Nakia, I understand the argument around incitement, but what about the coup? Technically, he still has the power, right?
So Article 3 of the Constitution, Section 3 of the Constitution, clearly talks about treason. And it speaks about treason in a way that what President Trump did yesterday matches it. So let me read that to you. Treason is the only crime specifically defined by the Constitution according to Section 3. A person is guilty of treason if he or she goes to war against the United States. What we saw yesterday was treason. What we saw yesterday was the president inciting war against the United States. I appreciate certainly a bit more clarity, certainly if I got that Article 3, Section 3 wrong, in defining what insurrectionist looks like, what treasonist looks like. So I would love a bit more clarity on that.
All right.
And I think that's the good thing about the law. The law is always open for interpretation. That's why lawyers have jobs all the time, and some of us make a lot of money.
So let me ask you then on this issue, LeBlanc. Let's talk about the 25th Amendment. Senator Chuck Schumer wants the VP Mike Pence to actually invoke the 25th Amendment. According to him, President Trump should not hold power, should not be in office even for a single day longer. He still has about 2 weeks to go, because he says what happened at the Capitol should not have president in power, and if he wants to invoke the 25th Amendment. Is that even an option?
It is definitely an option, but do I think Mike Pence is going to move forward with invoking the 25th Amendment? Absolutely not. It's not going to happen. So the next step would be for the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, which she has done in the past, to start the impeachment process to get the president impeached. And I don't know if there is sufficient time or if the members of Congress are even going to go the extra step. Now, I know there has been a legislation filed to start the impeachment process against the sitting president, but I'm not sure. But what I can tell you is that what we saw yesterday is that the president asked the Vice President Mike Pence to not do his duties, which was merely ceremonial. The whole notion of confirming the votes, it has no legal bearing, right? And we saw that Mike Pence followed the law, the Constitution, and did what we were hoping that he would have done. So Mike Pence, as a man who is a constitutionalist, who is a lawyer, I doubt he's going to take that route. And for the sake of the Republican establishment, because at the end of the day, you have to look at it this way. Donald Trump managed to have 70 million plus people voted for him, regardless of how you think of his presidency, regardless of his demeanor, regardless of whether or not you thought he was an effective president or not. 70 million people voted for him. And the Republican Party want to make sure that those people stay on board so that in 2024, they can have them so they can perhaps win the White House again and other seats across Congress. So.
All right. Nakia, you know the 25th Amendment would essentially mean that Mike Pence would take on a bit of power for the transition period at least. Is it necessary now because it only is invoked when the president is incapacitated? Is Trump incapacitated at this particular moment?
Listen, I would prefer that they did not invoke the 25th Amendment. I would prefer instead which probably won't happen, that they file articles of impeachment. What the 25th Amendment does is essentially say that the president is not mentally competent to hold office any longer, right? He's not mentally suitable. But what that does, the long-term effects of that, is that when the southern state of New York tries to file or prosecutes him after office, and other states try to prosecute him after office, he automatically has an insanity plea, or he also automatically has a mental incapacity plea, which is not sufficient enough for him to deal with the crimes that he's done. So, listen, I think that there's no easy answer to this. I personally would not like the 25th Amendment invoked, because I want to make sure that justice is served on this president for the 4 years that he's minted injustices on the American people. But I don't see also that the impeachment of articles will go anywhere, only if Mitch McConnell says. But again, we had about over 100 Republicans oppose the Electoral College process after the riots. And so the fact that you need at least 2/3 of the Senate to make sure that the president is kind of taken out of the presidency, I don't see it. I think both Congress and I think both Senate are in tight spots. I think it would be a lot easier if the two senators that won in Atlanta were seated at the moment. That would be a lot easier. But at the moment, I think it's a hard road. But I do believe that he should definitely be impeached.
Yeah.
The other side of that, I will agree that 70 million plus people did vote for him, and that is half of the country.
Yeah.
But I do think that half of his voters also understand, and they also saw what was on display yesterday in the United States, or the day before yesterday in the United States. I think that they did see kind of what the president was really about. So certainly, I think that his likability is probably melting away, at least with part of his supporters.
So, LeBlanc, what then are the options left? Should Americans just weather the storm and wait for the 20th? Because he has now admitted that he will transfer power.
Yeah, I think, like my co-panelist said, this is a very tough one. But I do think ultimately that we should just allow this to continue, and allow the president to peacefully transfer power. But also, in my foreign policy circle yesterday, there was this joke going around, because we know, had this happened in Kenya, in Abuja, in Johannesburg, the U.S. Embassy would have released a statement saying that we are asking for a peaceful transfer of power, and that we are praying for peace and economic prosperity for the people of whatever relevant country that they may be in. So the ambassadors here in D.C., I went on different websites, and even the Kenyan embassy page, to see if your embassy had released a statement calling for a peaceful transfer of power, but he hadn't done so. But also, what I think the takeaway from this is that America, yes, one of the greatest democracies, has been tested. And I can tell you, we have prevailed because the rule of law, and because we have strong institutions. So our strategic partners all across the world, as we are watching this unfold, I think foreign governments need to focus on the strengthening of their institutions, to ensure that when you do have a candidate like President Donald J. Trump, that they don't cling on to power and don't leave, because that's not the democratic way of doing things. So again, I think the rule of law prevails, and our democratic values also prevail in America.
Yeah, LeBlanc, let me stay with you for a bit. You mentioned that you pass by the Capitol a lot of times, and it is incredibly difficult to get there. Nakia also brought this up earlier on, saying that, are we seeing some kind of white privilege when it comes to how the police handled the protesters? Because we didn't see the same kind of easy kids' gloves sort of handling for the Black Lives Matter protest.
Yeah, I don't only walk by the Capitol. I actually go inside the Capitol and I meet with various actors. And again, like I said earlier, it is incredibly difficult to access certain offices unless you are escorted by a staffer. And even entering the Capitol, you have to go through security. They have to search your purse and so on. So yes, I agree. There was an element of white privilege there because I think if those protesters were black or brown folks, they would have met with a whole lot more force. And another thing that I think is important to note is that the Attorney General of the District of Columbia had released a statement on Monday asking for DC residents to remain indoors for the entire week because they were expecting this protest and this rioting and this violence to transpire. But yet, there were not sufficient officers on the ground to respond to this riot and to this disaster that we all witnessed yesterday. And another thing that I think Black America learned is that police officers know how to de-escalate situations. It's just that when it comes to people of color, because of biases and racism that are rooted in the American system, some of our brothers and sisters end up dying in the process. So yes, white privilege was at full play yesterday. It is disgusting, and as a Black woman in America, I'm appalled to see what transpired and how those protesters and those rioters in particular were able to walk out unharmed ultimately.
Yeah. Nakia, what do you make of that situation? How then can this be dealt with, especially with President-elect Joe Biden coming into power now? There's this issue of white privilege also giving a lot of prominence to that. How can he specifically handle it, considering it is a divisive issue even right now in the U.S.? Nakia? All right, I seem to be having a bit of a challenge with Nakia there. We'll get back to her in just a bit.
So, listen, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, Nakia, I can hear you now.
Okay. So I can tell you right now that I have to agree with my co-panelist on this. And I will say that I'm absolutely furious. I am absolutely furious. What I watched the day before yesterday in Kenya, and what I watched all day yesterday on the news was a clear example of white supremacy, was a clear example of white privilege. Particularly when you see the pictures of Black Lives Matter protests, peaceful protests, and how cops were lined up with riot gear, row after row after row, how they beat, how they shot, how they arrested, how they harassed, and how they incited these protests. How many people have been arrested, how many people have been brought up on charges. And to again, as the co-panelist said, it is incredibly difficult to get into the Capitol. It's incredibly difficult. You can't walk in with weapons. You have to be checked. There are so many security points as you're going into the Capitol. And the fact that they were not only able to get up the stairs of the Capitol, but they were able to get through the doors and sit in Nancy Pelosi's office and other senators and congresspeople's office is absolutely ridiculous to me, to the point where this morning I was watching where they couldn't find many of the people that were in the Capitol. I think they made about 80 arrests, but certainly there were thousands of people there, and many more, hundreds of them were in that Capitol building. So you can see that there are two Americas, and even reading comments on Burke Bright and other places, you can see that people just don't see some people don't see what the problem was yesterday. They thought that these insurrectionists had the right to go into the people's building, had the right to sit into people's office because they have dominion over it. They own it. Just like they own America that they colonized, just like they own the buildings that slaves built. It is just absolutely ridiculous to me. And every time I watch it, I am absolutely furious because I know, and I'm very clear that there are very two Americas, and I am happy that President-elect Biden spoke about this in his speech yesterday to the country.
Okay, LeBlanc. So on Wednesday at the Save America rally, and I want to read what Trump told his supporters, and I quote. He says, "We are going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue, and we are going to Capitol, and we are going to try and give our Republicans, the weak ones, the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take back our country. Was that the tipping point, or was there already simmering tension over time and this was just a trigger?
I think. Okay. So back to what my co-panelist comment a few minutes ago about the inciting violence element, right? Charge rather. So that comment could be interpreted so many different ways, right? But it could be interpreted to that Trump inciting violence because there was already so much anger because so for some reason there are some Trump supporters who seem to believe that there was so much fraud in our last election to the point where it was stolen from the president. And I think the evidence shows otherwise, and even the courts have heard cases and pretty much said you don't have a case here. But for some reason, those folks, they believe that something happened and they believe that their votes did not ultimately count. So what I think is important for us to learn here is the power of information that is being shared on social media. Because those folks, they're getting this information somewhere. And a lot of it is coming from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and you name it. And the question is, how do we properly ensure that, yes, people should have access to information, people should have the freedom of speech to express their thoughts, but how do we allow and ensure that people gather a reliable and trustworthy information? And I think that from a legal perspective, it is a bit tough to make that happen. So I think individuals have a duty. The onus is on individuals to ensure that, to fact check, to double check information, to ensure for accuracy. And also, I saw that Facebook has censored the president's speech, and the president can only post on Facebook for an extended period of time. Now, Facebook is a private company. Facebook can do whatever Facebook pleases, but nobody wants to see the president of a country being censored. But perhaps because of the past actions of the president, some of the comments that he has made, and because of where we are right now as a nation, that was probably the best decision for now.
Yeah, but LeBlanc, legally speaking, this can't really stick, really, because at no point did he call for protests. He just said we are walking down the Pennsylvania Avenue and we're going to the Capitol. Legally speaking, can you stick this as incitement?
Well, and that's the point I was trying to make earlier. It depends on, because lawyers argue anything, right? It's a matter of showing it's the intent. That's what I was talking about earlier. Can you show the intent that when he said those things, he knew that he was going to cause the actors to have acted the way they behaved yesterday? So the intent has to be there, and oftentimes, in most cases, it is almost impossible to show intent.
Okay. Nakia, what do you make of that statement? Considering right after that, he did actually say, he called for calm, telling the protesters that leave peacefully, go home, we love you, you're very special. Was that too little too late?
He's a joke. I mean, it's over for him. I think, listen, incitement happened a very long time ago. It happened with John Hawley. It happened with Ted Cruz. It happened with the complicit silence of Mitch McConnell, with the Attorney General for Texas, and so many other Republicans that either in silence supported him or spoke up for his rhetoric. During the debates with President-elect Biden, he told the Proud Boys, which is an extreme white supremacist group, to stand down and stand by, right? That he knew exactly what his supporters were able to do. He knew what they were capable of to do. He's seen it before. He saw how they showed up at a Black Lives Matter protest in Portland and other places around the country to start trouble, to hurt BLM protesters who were only fighting for equal rights, who were only fighting to not get shot and killed. This president knew exactly, because he saw it before, he knew exactly what his supporters would do, particularly when he told them to stand down and stand by. And when he said, go down and show strength, that's really clear to me about what he wanted them to do, what he was sending them off to do. For the Game of Thrones fans, he's like the Mad King, right? He's like, if I can't have it, burn it all. And it's just really unfortunate to know that the president of the United States can incite that level of violence and has that power, and he still has access to the nuclear codes. It is lost for words, actually.
Right, let me bring in LeBlanc back on this. LeBlanc, let's talk about Georgia now. You see, we saw it's not all doom and gloom. There was a Georgia runoffs, and it all went Democrat. John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. But Warnock captured my attention because he was elected as the state's first black senator. What is the significance of that for Georgia?
I think it's very significant, not just for Georgia, but for the South, right? Because I think that when you have a Congress, and the role of Congress is to write laws, and the judiciary interprets the law, right? I think you need representation. You need people with a diverse background, with a diverse understanding of the issue of the people on the ground. So I think outside of the fact that it is a significant and a historic win for the African American community, but I think ultimately it is my prayer that it will translate into transformative policy that will come out of Congress and ultimately 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, because we know that now President-elect Biden, rather, has both chambers, has the House and the Senate. So there is absolutely no reason why transformative policies should not come about under this administration. While I am excited, I'm elated about a president that is going to bring back the soul of America's democracy, but I'm more concerned about the action, the doing, because the reality is that people in America are suffering. Black and brown people are disproportionately impacted in the areas of environmental injustice, when it comes to our prison system, when it comes to education, when it comes to housing, employment, every sector that you could think of. People of color and poor white people in this country are impacted. So I pray that this president, along with the Senate and a House that the people of America has given him, will do right by the American people and push for transformative policy that will make America a country where, regardless of your race, socioeconomic status, or class, or gender, you can pursue life, liberty, and happiness.
Okay. Nakia, what do you make of the Democrats' win in Georgia Senate race, John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock?
Oh boy. Oh boy, that is really exciting. I mean, Georgia, the slave state, the Bible Belt, has now a Jewish immigrant who is a senator and a black man who is now the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, which was the former church of Martin Luther King. It's exciting, and I'm very, very proud. And the first time, so Georgia basically turned blue. And even if you looked at the map, you saw a sea of red, and then you saw Fulton County and DeKalb County, all going blue. And the reason that they're there, and the reason that Biden won Georgia, is predominantly because Black and brown people showed up to vote. Georgia is also has a large Latino population that also showed up to vote as well. So it is incredibly exciting. And I think to my co-panelist's point again, the fact that Biden should be able, and first woman president-elect Kamala Harris, president-elect, vice president-elect Kamala Harris, should be able to have policies that will help people of color, help the U.S. infrastructure, help education, support healthcare. And so the hope is that over the next 2 years, because there is another Senate election in 2 years, over the next 2 years that there will be some significant change. Democracy will be brought back into good graces, will be respected around the world. And I'm hoping that those Georgia senators will be able to do that. Because the Democratic Party, just like the Republican Party, there's some splits and fractures down both of those parties. So we have to see how all of it plays out. The Senate, the Democratic Senate, is now in control, but by a sliver. Everyone has to vote the same way. If one person decides not to vote, then the Republicans can also change the law. So it's a really tight one, although Democrats control it. Madam Vice President is the deciding factor. But if one Democrat decides not to vote along with a particular policy, then it may not happen.
All right, LeBlanc, did you see that the vote in Georgia as a Black Voters Matter kind of movement? Or there are those who are saying that President Trump essentially shot himself in the foot? Because when he was out there, it was counterproductive for him to tell the supporters that the vote will be stolen, but go out and vote anyway. In turn, it then suppressed the voter turnout in Georgia.
I think one could argue that that may have played a role, but I think also you have Stacey Abrams, who ran as governor, and the governorship was, some say it was stolen from her. She is an amazing Black woman. She is Black girl magic on steroids, and she has been working around getting folks registered to vote for the past 10 years, along with countless other organizations on the ground in Georgia. So I think what we saw is that the work of those people came into fruition. And I know sometimes you work on a project and you may not see the immediate impact of it, but I think what we saw yesterday was the impact, or the day before yesterday, was the impact of all of the work that had been done by your activists on the ground to get people registered to vote. And people showed up, and they showed out in numbers. And again, with the president, some of his rhetorics, he did turn some people off. And ultimately, those two Republicans lost the election. But just to be frank with you, it was not by a large margin. Just so you know, it was somewhat close. But nonetheless, the Democrats did it, and now the Democrats now have the Senate. So we'll see what happens from there.
LeBlanc, I still want to hear your views on something that Nakia has just brought up, the issue of the Senate now being split right down the middle, because it's now a 50-50 with Kamala Harris now having the swing vote. But in the event any Democrat votes with the Republicans, then that is it. So what is the significance of the Democrat majority Senate to the U.S. President-elect Joe Biden's rule?
So I think that there needs to be unity within the Democratic Party. There needs to be a conversation about what the agenda is going to look like, and you have to have buy-in from senators, from folks from the House of Representatives, to make sure that when there is a piece of policy, we're all going to vote in the same manner. Because the reality is, you have what you call blue dog Democrats. Those blue dog Democrats, you just never know which way they are going to vote. Sometimes they may vote Republican, they can vote Democrat. But another thing that I want to make clear is that there is division within the Democratic Party. You have people like OAC, Alexandria Cortez, who is a progressive, who has been very vocal about some of her vision and about some of the policies put forth by the Democratic Party, and she says that those policies are not necessarily transformative enough. So I think the Democratic Party needs to do some soul searching. They need to sit down together and have a conversation, a frank conversation about the issues impacting the people of this country. Because at the end of the day, each and every person who is elected to Congress is represented to represent the will of the people. So there needs to be that consensus within the Democratic Party to be effective.
Yeah. Nakia, there's something also we spoke about earlier on, the issue of Facebook and Instagram having blocked Trump until the transition is complete. Does that help in any way, considering you can still go on TV and make these announcements? And this is a man who has the nuclear codes. So blocking him online, how does that even help?
Listen, Facebook and Twitter, and Facebook owns Instagram. I think it's a lot too late. Many of these groups formed, many of these kind of supreme right-wing groups formed with groups on Facebook. Facebook has control of that. They monitor that, on and on. It's just a lot too late. The fact that he only has about, at this point, 12 days or 10 days left, let's see. He has about 12 days left in office. and now they kind of indefinitely block his. It makes no sense. He's had time to build up other platforms that now he can go on and they can go underground. What they should have done was make sure that they did this very early on. They monitor these groups very early on. They work with the FBI and the CIA and internal intelligence to make sure that these groups were checked, and that the people who were visited upon, who were starting these groups and saying, hey, we're going to do this in the United States. I mean, it's the same thing that they do with international terrorists. I mean, they're domestic terrorists, and that's how you handle domestic terrorists. But Facebook allowed them to build these groups. Facebook allowed them for years to plan. They allowed Donald Trump to do the same thing. So for me, it's a little bit too late. I'm not impressed at all.
LeBlanc, what do you think about this? Because then it also opens avenues where his supporters will then feed off sympathy, saying that the system is against our person. And also, it gives the room for other pseudo accounts to come up and people to peddle fake news.
Yeah, there is definitely that element, and I think perhaps the president should be censored, considering some of his rhetorics over the past 4 years. But I'm concerned about the precedent that we have set forth here for future presidents and future actors. Again, Facebook is a private company, and Facebook can do as it wishes. But I'm also always concerned about the law and how this could set a bad precedent for other presidents in the future and other elected officials. So we'll see. But also, to a point that you made earlier, since the president is now censored, and I think he's only censored until the inauguration date, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think after that he will have full access to social media. But I'm concerned that perhaps he may use this opportunity to create his own platform where nobody can deny him access, and have those 70 million plus people follow him so that he can spread whatever message that he needs to spread to prepare himself for 2024. And if he's not preparing himself to run again, perhaps to help the next candidate, Republican candidate, to ensure that they have the followers, they have the supporters, so that they can win effectively in 2024.
Okay. Neki, as we wind up on this now, so UK's Boris Johnson said yesterday that Trump was completely wrong to encourage protesters and to cast doubt on the US election results. So what does this mean for the Trump's legacy? What is it to you?
Is he worried about his legacy now? I think it's a little bit too late to worry about his legacy. His legacy was ruined when he took the inauguration, and he basically was saying fire and fury, that America was going to change, it was going to burn down, and then one of his first orders of business was to restrict Muslims from coming into the country, and then he caged children from that were coming across the border, trying to run from crime in their country. I don't think that now is the time to be worried about his legacy. I think his legacy has been ruined for 4 years. If they build a library for him, it should be a jail, quite frankly. He doesn't need anything. The legacy is done. It's not even a question.
LeBlanc, what do you think of Trump's legacy?
I think President Donald Trump certainly shook America's democracy. And in particular, he tested the strength of our institutions. And ultimately, because America's institutions have been strengthened over the past decades and centuries, he did not prevail. And again, like I said earlier, I think one of the greatest lessons that we have learned here is that it is incredibly important for you to have a strong judiciary, an independent judiciary, for you to have an independent parliament that obviously can work in concert with the president, but at the same token, represent the will of the people, not the will of the president. So again, I think that he ultimately tested America's democracy on so many different fronts. I mean, 2020, from the time the president was elected in 2016 up until 2020, his presidency has been unprecedented. We have never seen a president to behave in the manner that the president has behaved. So this is a lesson for us to maybe it's time to have a new election, a reform in America to ensure some of the confusion that existed throughout the past year during the presidential election season don't repeat itself in the future. But I think our framers never anticipated that you would have a president such as Donald J. Trump occupying 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
And that's my point right there, LeBlanc. Is he likely to be jailed?
Well, there are some charges against the president. Now, the question is, with the federal charges in particular, the question is whether or not President-elect Biden, once he is sworn in, will give the Attorney General, which he recently nominated, the green light to prosecute President Donald Trump, because there's been some argument about whether or not he can even pardon himself before he leaves office. And the answer is no. Under the Constitution says the president has the power to grant pardon. To grant something is to bestow something upon another being. You cannot bestow something upon yourself. That the essence of the definition does not allow for that. So no, the president cannot pardon himself. Now, if we go back to what was discussed earlier, Vice President Pence, if he were to invoke the 25th Amendment to become president, then perhaps he could then pardon the president for all of what he has been accused of or whatnot. But as it stands right now, the president, it's up to President-elect Biden whether or not he wants to pursue some of those charges against President Donald Trump.
All right. Nakia, finally on this, as the President-elect Joe Biden and VP-elect Kamala Harris come into office, what should their priorities be? The regime changes in the next 12 days.
So that's easy. Listen, we are dealing with one of the worst health crises in our lifetime since the early 1900s. And so there are hundreds of thousands of people who are now suffering. There's food insecurity. There are health issues and medical bills that need to be sorted out. I think the first order of business is to make sure that the American people are able to survive and able to kind of put food on their table and pay their rent. I think their second order of business is to make sure that as many Americans can get vaccinated as humanly possible, and that's the first and second dose, or in some cases, the first dose, which has failed miserably under warp speed, under whatever that was that President Trump was trying to do. So I think the two orders of business, in my opinion, would be making sure that the American people have food on the table, can house their children, that there's a that they close the digital educational divide, and then secondly that American citizens are vaccinated. And I think longer term, it's making sure that the racial divide is closed in terms of economics, in terms of education. So there's a lot of work that they have to do, but I think the first 90 days must deal with the American people and making sure that we're okay, and then we can start to look at other places and look outward.
All right. LeBlanc, what are the priorities for you?
I think one of the first priorities, as my co-panelists said, will be the pandemic, because the fact of the matter is thousands and thousands of people here in America have died, and millions are infected. Our economy here in America has declined, and not only America's economy, but the global economy because of this pandemic. So I think it's first this pandemic, ensuring that there is vaccine, not just for America, but vaccine for developing nations. Because if America is focusing just on America, we are doomed to fail, because we saw how one person infected with the virus in Wuhan, China, was able to infect an entire world and impact the global economy. So if we think that wealthy nations are just going to get this vaccine and they are not going to prioritize developing nations, we are sadly mistaken, because it will come back and it will hurt those wealthy nations in the long run. So the COVID vaccination, our economy, and obviously, as a Black woman, I have to say this: strengthening some of our laws that protect people of color and poor people in the areas of environmental justice, housing, employment, education, and so on. So those are my three areas that I think should be a priority for the incoming president and vice president elect.
All right. Thank you so much for giving context on this issue of America's, what many people are calling America's dark moment. Joanna LeBlanc, National Security and Foreign Affairs Legal Analyst from D.C. Thank you so much. And Nakia White, Political International Relations Expert, speaking to us about this issue. It's also on the front page of our Daily Nation's Head, Chaos and Shame, and also on the Daily Nation as well. Shame, disgrace. Trump finally yields to power of vote. He has now admitted that he will transfer power peacefully. We're taking a quick break here on Daybreak. When we come back, DJ Roy T-Boy is on the decks as always.